In February 1788, in Westminster Hall, the oldest room in English public life, the most powerful man Britain had ever sent to India stood as a prisoner at the bar. Warren Hastings had governed a subcontinent. Now he was accused of crimes against the very people he had ruled. The prosecution would last 7 years. And the real question in that hall was not only whether one man was guilty, it was whether an empire could be. Maps, money, decisions. This is Tareekh ka Hisaab. Begin with the strangeness of it. Warren Hastings was not a conqueror in the mold of Clive. He was an administrator, careful, overworked, a scholar who loved Persian poetry and funded the study of Sanskrit law. For 13 years, he had held the company's Indian empire together through war, rebellion, and the famine we audited last time. In 1785, he sailed home expecting thanks, a pension perhaps, a statue. Instead, waiting for him in Parliament was a man who had decided that Hastings was the face of everything rotten in the British conquest of India. His name was Edmund Burke, and the charge was not that Hastings had failed, it was how he had succeeded. Edmund Burke was not against empire. That is the first thing to understand. He was against arbitrary power, the idea that a man with an army and a treasury could do as he pleased simply because he was far from home, and his victims were not English. Burke gave that idea a name and demolished it. There is no such thing, he said, as a geographical morality. Cruelty does not become acceptable because it is committed 1,000 miles away. An Englishman does not shed his conscience at the Cape of Good Hope. So Parliament faced a choice: quietly honor the man who had held India, or put him on trial and declare that those who rule in Britain's name must answer to Britain's law. In 1787, the House of Commons voted to impeach. 3 accusations carried the weight of the case, and each, at heart, was about money taken by force. First, the Rohilla War of 1774. Hastings had rented out the company's army to the Nawab of Oudh to crush the Rohilla people next door, a conquest for hire, paid in cash. Second, Chait Singh, the Raja of Benares, a loyal tributary, squeezed for ever larger contributions until, cornered, he resisted and was deposed, his territory absorbed. Third, the Begums of Oudh. The company pressured the Nawab to seize the treasure of his own mother and grandmother, and their household servants were imprisoned to force the handover. It was, the prosecution said, the robbing of widows with the machinery of a state. The trial opened on the 13th of February 1788, and it was, at first, the greatest show in England. Tickets to Westminster Hall changed hands for the price of a house. Duchesses queued before dawn. And the managers of the prosecution were not dry lawyers. They were the finest orators of the age. When Richard Brinsley Sheridan spoke on the Begums of Oudh, the speech ran for days, and the hall sat spellbound. Listeners wept, some fainted, and Sheridan himself sank into the arms of a colleague when he finished. For a season, the empire was being narrated not as glory, but as crime, to a packed and weeping house. But a spectacle is not a verdict. Hastings' judges were the House of Lords, many of them men with their own stake in the imperial order, and the law of evidence, it turned out, was on his side. Much of Burke's case was moral and political, magnificent as oratory, but hard to pin to a specific, provable crime. So the fire met the machine. 7 years passed. The crowds thinned, the managers aged. Some of the lords who had heard the thunderous opening were dead or gone by the end. What had begun as the trial of the century slowly became a long, grinding matter of procedure, and public attention drained away. In April 1795, the Lords delivered their judgment. Warren Hastings was acquitted on every single charge. The evidence, they ruled, fell short. The man who had governed millions walked out of Westminster Hall a free man. But follow the ledger, as we always do. 7 years of defense had cost Hastings a fortune. By some accounts, £70,000 and more, enough to ruin him. And so the East India Company, the institution he had served, and was accused of serving too ruthlessly, quietly granted him money to live on. He was cleared by the state and rescued by the company, acquitted, bankrupt, and pensioned by the very power on trial beside him. So, did Edmund Burke lose? On the verdict, yes. But something had been entered into the record that no acquittal could strike out, that the power of an empire could be summoned to a courtroom, named, and made to answer. The man went free. The principle did not. Remember the thesis of this whole series: an empire built one document at a time. This was the first document that dared to ask whether the building was just. It changed almost nothing, and it changed everything. Next time, the empire that had learned to rule meets the one ruler determined to break it, Tipu Sultan and the wars for the south. This is Tareekh ka Hisaab.